Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Smith, and since it's Tuesday, you know the drill. It's time for another Contradictions episode. Today, we're diving into a question that's probably popped up for you at some point. Is it okay to call someone a fool? Maybe you've let the word slip when someone cuts you off in traffic, or you've heard it tossed around in a heated moment. I sure did back in my middle school days, usually followed by a stern look from a teacher. But here's the kicker. Jesus has some strong words about this in Matthew 5:22, and yet the Bible seems to fling fool around like confetti elsewhere. So, contradiction or context? Let's unpack it together and see what Scripture really says about foolishness, wisdom, and why Jesus' warning might not be what you first think. Let's start with the big picture. The Bible loves a good showdown between wisdom and foolishness. It's like the ultimate cage match running through the pages. Proverbs 1:7 gives us the playbook. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Notice that? A fool isn't just someone who can't solve a math problem or burns toast. It's someone who looks at God's wisdom and says, "Nah, I'll pass," opting instead for their own GPS, which, spoiler alert, usually leads to a dead end. That's the thread we're pulling on today, because when we get to Jesus' words, it's not so simple. Now, fast forward to Matthew 5:22, part of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. This is where it gets spicy. Let's hear it from two translations that keep the word fool front and center. First, the King James Version. "But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire." Next, the New International Version. "But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raca, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, You fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell." Okay, hellfire for calling someone a fool? That's not a slap on the wrist. That's a cosmic red card. I remember first hearing this verse as a kid, and it stuck with me. Not just because I'd thrown fool around like it was nothing, but because it was everywhere. Songs like Chain of Fools or Fool for the City, yes, I'm old enough to have rocked out the fog hat, made it feel harmless. But Jesus isn't joking here. So does this mean we're banned from ever using the word? And what about all the times the Bible does use it? The Skeptics Annotated Bible, they're like the referees who love to call fouls, lists some examples that seem to say, go ahead, call him a fool. Psalm 14:1 and 53:1 both say, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. Proverbs 28:26 adds, he that trusts in his own heart is a fool. Then Jesus himself gets in on it in Matthew 23:17. Ye fools and blind to the Pharisees. Paul joins in. Galatians 3:1. O foolish Galatians. So what's the deal? One minute it's hellfire, the next it's open season. Let's see if we can sort this out. In Matthew 5:22, Jesus isn't just talking about vocabulary. He's zooming in on the heart. This is the Sermon on the Mount, where he takes the Old Testament law like thou shalt not kill and cranks it up a notch. Murder's bad, sure, but Jesus says anger's the root, and words like Raca and fool are the fruit. Raca, an Aramaic term, means empty-headed or worthless. It's not a playful jab, it's a declaration of contempt, like saying you're nothing, beyond hope. The Greek word moros, where moron comes from, carries a similar punch here, implying moral and spiritual bankruptcy. Jesus says if you sling that at someone out of anger, You're not just name calling, you're playing judge, jury, and executioner on their soul. And friends, we don't have a robe for that courtroom. Let's flip back, though, to the other verses. Psalm 14:1 and 53:1 aren't insults. They're x-rays of a spiritual condition. Calling someone a fool for denying God is like a doctor saying, "You've got pneumonia." It's a diagnosis, not a diss. Proverbs 28:26 does the same. Trusting your heart over God's wisdom is foolish, like building a house on quicksand. No malice, just facts. Jesus and Paul follow suit. When Jesus says, "Ye fools and blind," in Matthew 23:17 and 19, he's not cursing the Pharisees. He's shining a spotlight on their hypocrisy to shake them awake. Same with Luke 24:25. "O fools and slow of heart to believe," to the disciples. It's a loving nudge, not a shove off a cliff. Paul's "O foolish Galatians" in Galatians 3:1, that's a teacher scolding his class for forgetting the basics. Intent's the key. Truth versus venom. Here's where it gets really interesting. I came across a phenomenally technical article by Michael Bar Asher Siegel from January 2017. The title's a mouthful. Matthew 5:22, the insult, fool, and the interpretation of the law in Christian and rabbinic sources. Don't worry, I'll break it down for us non-doctoral folks. The writer argues that Raka and Moreh weren't just random zingers in Jesus' day. They were loaded weapons in a theological showdown. Picture this. Jewish groups like the Pharisees and Qumran community, the Dead Sea Scrolls crew, were duking it out over who had the right take on God's law. The Qumran folks called the Pharisees Dorshei Halakwat, or seekers of empty things, saying their Torah ideas were flimsy. The rabbis clapped back. "No, our study fills it up." It was like a first-century debate club with higher stakes. Jesus steps in and says, "Enough with the name-calling wars." He's not banning fool outright. He's warning against hurling it in anger at your brother, making it as serious as murder. It's a game changer. Focus on relationships, not winning arguments. Let's try an analogy to nail this down. Say you're a chef tasting a dish. You say, "This soup's bad," to tweak it. Fair game, right? But if you yell, "This is garbage and you're a hack," at the cook, you've gone too far. That's Matthew 5:22. Jesus isn't against calling out foolishness. He's against cooking someone's worth in the fire of contempt. Or think of it like a courtroom. Jesus says, "You're not the judge. Don't slam the gavel on someone's soul." Context decides, not a blanket rule. We can speak truth, but we don't get to curse. Want another angle? GotQuestions.org has a solid take. I've tweaked it a bit for clarity. Jesus isn't saying we can call a choice foolish, but raka is contempt, implying someone is eternally worthless. We don't have that power. Instead, we should turn our hearts toward wisdom, maybe save a soul, James 5:20 stuff. That's the lens shift. We're not executioners, we're guides. So when the Bible calls out fools, it's not contradicting Jesus, it's showing us what to avoid, not what to attack. It's like a road sign saying, "Bridge out." It's a warning, not a weapon. Ever wonder how this played out back then? Imagine a Pharisee and a Qumran guy arguing over Sabbath rules. One yells, "You empty-headed fool," and the other fires back, "Your Torah's a joke." Jesus walks by and says, "Guys, chill, that's not the point." He's not picking a team, he's rewriting the playbook. For us, it's the same deal. We can call a spade a spade. Hey, denying God's a bad move. But we don't get to bury someone with it. That's the line Jesus draws. Okay, let's slow down and chew on this. Ever had a moment where you let a word fly and wished you could hit rewind? I've been there. Teenage Lance wasn't exactly a saint with his mouth. Or, in complete honesty, neither is adult Lance, unfortunately. Or maybe you've silently written someone off in your head, like, "They're done, no hope, Matthew 5:22 is like a mirror. It forces us to look at our hearts. We don't get to play God and declare who's beyond grace. That's his turf. But we can point people to the exit when they're lost. James 5:20 says, "Whoever turns a sinner from the error of their way will save them from death and cover over a multitude of sins." That's our lane, lighthouse, not wrecking ball. Think about someone who rubs you the wrong way. Coworker, neighbor, that guy who still won't move ahead in traffic. How does Jesus' warning change your approach? Calling their actions foolish might be spot on. Dude, texting while driving is nuts. But slapping fool on their soul, that's where we pause. Ephesians 4:15 talks about speaking truth in love. It's a tightrope, sure, but it's the call. Correct with care, not condemn with spite. What's one way you could swap judgment for grace this week? Maybe it's biting your tongue or offering a hand instead of a jab. Let's wrestle with that together. Here's a story to mull over. I once knew a guy, let's call him Dave, who'd argued theology like it was blood sport. One day he called a friend a fool over some minor doctrine spat, young versus old earth creation. Full-on rack of vibes. Later, he regretted it, patched things up, and said, "Man, I was a fool there." And it stuck with me. Anger blinds us, but grace opens eyes. How's that hit you? Ever been a Dave or had a Dave in your life? I bet we've all danced close to that line at some point. All right, we're nearing the end, so let's tie it up. Next time fool bubbles up, whether it's at the slow driver or the loud relative at Thanksgiving, ask yourself, am I pointing to truth or just unloading frustration? Am I naming a mistake or nailing their worth to the floor? The Bible doesn't dodge foolishness. Psalm 14:1, Proverbs 28:26. Jesus, Paul, they all spotlight it. But Matthew 5:22 says every person's got God's image, never beyond his grip. It's not about gagging us, it's about guarding our hearts. So, here's the takeaway. We're not here to curse fools, but to call them to wisdom. Jesus used fool to teach, not torch. Paul did too. For us, it's about intent. Truth with love, not hate with heat. Next time you're humming, "Everybody Plays the Fool," great tune, by the way, remember, we've all got a little fool in us, and God's still reaching. That's the beauty of it. Oh, and Foghat's Fool for the City, it's still a classic. Maybe Jesus was prepping me for this episode way back then. That's a wrap for today's friends. We're a community here, and I love hearing from you. Pop over to our Bible Difficulties and Answers Facebook page to connect with me and the gang. All episodes are at BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers.podbean.com. Give them a listen. Got a question or just want to chat? Email me at BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers@gmail.com. I'm always game. And if you're liking this, hit like and subscribe. Tell a couple of buddies. Maybe drop a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're at. It helps spread the word about this journey we're on. I'm Lance Smith. Until next time, wishing you good luck, good health, and God bless. So long, everybody.